Good morning. I always feel uncomfortable with those kinds of, introductions because you have like 20 years, dude. Feels so old. So let's just get started, shall we? Has everyone had their coffee? Really important. Okay. Break in case of dire emergency. We're going to be talking about stuff that I think is really important that we don't talk about a lot because it tends to get pretty complex and sometimes a bit boring. But really, it's things I think we need to prepare for just to understand where the hysteria and hype is versus what we actually need to do as a security community. So let's talk about our secure quantum future. So how many of you saw the recent announcement by Google saying that they achieved quantum supremacy? Yep. Okay, only a couple of you. So I just want to explain what that means, because if you just see it, it sounds like, oh my God, time travel is now possible. If you see it on one side. But really what it is Google has done some operations with a quantum computer which are significantly faster than they could have done had they used a regular or classic computer or supercomputer to achieve them. So that's all this announcement really means. And initially, the haters, read IBM, IBM said it's not a big deal. They didn't really achieve it. It's not really quantum supremacy. And this is like going back and forth, and this will go on for a certain amount of time unless we have some sort of consensus about which operation do we consider significant enough to be performed by a quantum computer that actually shows us that what we have at these very early stages is really groundbreaking and allows us to think about a future where we have a post-quantum computing future, where everything, before it was kind of like interesting but slightly slow, and now we're able to do these, really cool scientific modeling-y things on a quantum computer. So this jury is still out depending on who you ask, but if you speak to people who are not in one camp of the Google versus IBM versus Microsoft camp, if you speak to someone who's like more in the academic area, they'll tell you that what Google achieved is still pretty damn cool. Yeah, so I would like to leave it there without getting into the nooks and crannies. And then when we talk about why do we even need a quantum computer? Who actually gives a fuck? Well, it comes to some very fundamental things. As we've gone on, we've been very comfortably sitting on our butts because we've had Moore's Law, right? Everybody knows what Moore's Law is? Anybody not remember? Be honest. Okay, cool. I love you, dude. Thank you. All right, who wants to remind him? Now it's a test for the rest of you fakers who are like, I know what it is. Come on, who wants to remind him? Do you want to remind him? No? Go for it, dude.
Is it processing power doubling every year?
18 months. But it's usually with an asymmetric decline in cost. So you've got like this increase in processing power, so it's really, really cool. We get like smaller, faster computing power, but the cost and the size are decreasing as we get this exponential power. So it's really cool. So we've been like really comfy with this. It means that we can buy, bigger, faster things. It's been awesome. But now we have an entrance of something for the last couple of years, what we call Amdahl's law. And Amdahl's law means no matter how much you add in terms of physical capacity, your actual computing power, like what you can actually do with the thing, is actually decreasing instead of increasing. Is that clear? So we keep adding physical stuff, but we're not actually equating it to an increase in computing power. Okay? And this Amdahl's law thing makes people like the telecommunications sector, everyone who's working in cloud infrastructures, all of the processing power that we need as a planet, it makes us concerned that we can't actually meet those needs. So because of Moore's law, and then the decline in cost, now we've got Amdahl's law, we keep adding stuff at a super expensive rate, but it's not actually increasing. So because of this entrance, we need to find different solutions for computing architecture that would give us this consistent drive of stuff we can do. And this is specifically for use in large data set problems. So lots and lots of data, and trying to find like a very specific set of solutions from that large set of data. This is why we would need these types of computing architectures for. And, you know, frankly, like, these problems are not trivial. They're actually things that could fundamentally change the fabric of our society. For example, if we could do some of this stuff with a quantum computer, we could do things like amino acid folding. We could predict how drugs would interact with different individuals. Right now, when you have even aspirin, right, there's a thing called patience to treat, which means that aspirin doesn't actually work on everyone in this audience in the same way. It affects like a certain amount of the population, which it actually helps. The rest, not so much. So imagine having like medicine that would actually work on every single individual just in this room. That's actually quite mind-numbing. And in order to do that kind of good science, in order to have early detection of cancer, in order to have personalized medicine, in order to like model all different types of scientific phenomenon, this is a really good reason why you would want a quantum computer. So the premise of this, you know, the whole building block of the whole thing is something called a qubit. You might have heard of this before. It was actually, the name qubit was actually given by a scientific researcher as a joke. It was like, ha ha ha, let's just call it a qubit. And they did this because they thought it was a really nice extrapolation of a bit. We all know what a bit is. Everybody knows. You're not awake yet. You remember what a bit? Yeah, okay, cool. We all remember what a bit is. But a qubit is a 0 and a 1, an on and off. Instead of saying you have this or this, you have this and this. So you have the on and the off state superpositioned at the same time. I don't know, that always blows my mind a little bit, but that's basically what a qubit is. So you have two states existing at the same time. So it's a quantum bit. And what makes quantum computers really cool is you have these qubits, you have this space where you would have the 0 or the 1. Now you have the 0 and the 1. And what's really cool is when they get freaky with each other, these qubits, and then they get entangled. You know, you have this maximally entangled pair. And when these qubits entangle with each other, this is what gives a quantum computer scale. It allows you to take the on or off, combine it with another qubit, which is on and off at the same time, and then you have now exponentially increased your probability space. Okay, so we say 2 to the n qubits. So entanglement is not a universally liked thing. And that's like started because Einstein was the original hater of entanglement. He said, you know, entanglement doesn't really work. It's more like spooky action at a distance, right? How can you explain this thing that something that is connected to something over an arbitrary space, like a very long distance, that it can impact each other? Impossible. Why does it suck so much? Because that would mean you would break the speed of light. Can't. Nothing travels faster than the speed of light. So if you would say that things are entangled over this arbitrary distance, it just wouldn't hold. We all agree? Well, we all should kind of agree with Einstein, but we all see this. But here's the deal. So we had a test. It actually happened in the Netherlands at the University of Delft. You can read about it in Nature in October of 2018. And what they did is they actually proved that this spooky action at a distance occurred. So they showed that, you know, you have this maximally entangled pair separated over a distance across the campus. They have the speed of light measurement as a reference. And what they did is they took this set of entangled photons and they flipped the one. And when they flipped the one, the other flipped too. This interaction happened instantaneously. And it actually did violate this idea that this happened faster than the speed of light. So this is something still that we don't know why. Okay, we also don't know how. We know it's not communication because that's truly the violation, but we don't understand how it actually happened. We just observe that the phenomenon did occur, and it's been repeated. This particular test has been repeated numerous times. The reason that it's so significant is because it's a loophole-free Bell test. So this test was actually originated by John Bell decades ago, but then every time they tried to explain it, they had to have loopholes in it that would explain how the test worked and say, well, you know, we can't guarantee that there's no other type of interaction or communication that would have explained this, so we have to add in a loophole. And this is the first loophole-free Bell test that was proven, so it's a really big deal for the field. Yeah? Are we all still with me Without the coffee, we're all still good? Okay. All right. There's another principle that is there around quantum computing, which is fragility and non-cloning. We all know what a replay attack looks like. We all know that you can try stuff and try to pwn it by sending multiple requests to a single system. The issue here is you can't with a quantum computer. There's a couple of finicky things about a quantum computer. First of all, these things are pretty darn unstable. Yeah, there's a principle called decoherence. So if you try to manipulate or touch it, it just says, screw you, I'm going back to lunch, and it collapses. The quantum state actually collapses. So that's the first finicky thing. That's the fragility. The second thing is no cloning. So a standard replay attack where we have a copy of information and then we can just try it out again, that wouldn't work either on a quantum computer. So you have this no cloning principle. And this is all because when you try to observe traffic or communications on a quantum computer, the observer actually interacts with the communication. And this is a fundamental problem where, these kinds of things, these kinds of cool attack mechanisms would not actually work. And there's also more than one type of quantum computer. So some of you might have heard about D-Wave or another quantum computer. You should know that these things are not all created equal. So the D-Wave type of computer is actually a quantum annealer. So it means that it's not impossible to build, but relatively easier to build. You can have thousands and thousands of qubits, but it performs fundamentally different operations than, say, an analog quantum or a universal quantum computer. And the universal quantum computer is, the holy grail. This is the thing that Google, IBM, Microsoft, that everybody's trying to build because it's the most usable for all of the different problems that I told you about earlier. This is the thing, when we have it, can do incredibly cool stuff. The D-Wave machine is far from useless. It's also capable of doing operations exponentially better than a regular classical computer, and it can also speed up other operations, just not solve them, but speed up other things that we would also be able to do with a classical computer. So it already has some advantage, but it's not capable of modeling that very large data set and looking for that needle in the haystack problem. Another coffee question. Everybody remember what a prime number is? Right? So this is a prime number sieve, and we're just walking through all the prime numbers. Okay? And what I want to tell you is the relevance of quantum computing, because you might think, why the hell is she presenting on this at this conference? The relevance of quantum computing to our field is revolving fundamentally out of a fear principle around what does the impact of quantum computing to cryptography. And the issue here is all of our asymmetric cryptography is based on basically very large prime numbers. So we take really large prime numbers, we multiply them together, we do other operations on them, and then we have public key cryptography, right? So if you take a look at what the specific threats are, it's pretty much because we base all of our crypto on two really difficult math problems. The first of which is integer factorization. So it's basically that we have an integer and we try to figure out what all of the factors were where you could derive that integer from. So for example, I'm just going to ask you because you were yawning, no offense, but it is early in the morning. That's why this is not an easy, but what is 9 times 8? 72, good. What are all the factors of 72? Well, that's okay. If you had a cup of coffee and I gave you a bit of time, we'd be fine. But actually, this is exactly the behavior of our classical computers. If we perform an operation in one way and we multiply 9 times 8, we're good. We know it's 72. So do our computers. But if we ask our computers to reverse that one-way function, yeah, just like you did, I have 72, now tell me what could possibly have created it, then we're like, all right, need coffee, need paper, need time, need friends, okay? So the clue is our current computers work the same way. And this problem is something that we could solve had we had a quantum computer. And that's partially because of the architecture that we have at our disposal with a quantum computer, that we can map all of the potential solutions on it. But it's just a fundamentally different way of thinking as well. So we would need a new class of problems to give a quantum computer if we want a new cryptographic algorithm that would be secure. So the second problem we have with cryptography is the discrete log issue. So I don't know if you can see it, I'm going to walk out of the way, but discrete logs are also called clock arithmetic. So if we have 3 to the 16th with a modulus, which is just a nice way to say remainder, of 17, the answer would be 1. Yeah? But to derive this again, with just the answer, to reverse what the original formula was that got us there, that's a lot harder. Everybody still cool? We all still with me? Yes? Okay. So those two difficult problems are the thing that uphold our cryptography today, that make it so strong and cool and awesome sauce. But we've got Shor and we've got Grover. Shor and Grover. So Shor is Peter Shor, and there's something called Shor's algorithm. And Shor's algorithm actually figured out, before there was ever a quantum computer, saying, like, if I had a quantum computer, this would be the algorithm I would use to actually reverse the one-way function of integer factorization. Yeah, that's what Peter Shor said. So awesome sauce. If we got a quantum computer and we got this algorithm, we're done. The integer factorization problem is like broken. And then Grover basically optimized the way to search through this large data set. So Grover allows us to figure out how to get to those, if we have all of these options mapped out, how do we get there quickest? By basically traveling all the routes. So it optimizes the search through a large database. And then we have to ask ourselves, there is a when. When is this going to happen? What is it going to take? And it really depends on what we have at our disposal. So if you take a look, where's the horizontal axis? Sorry, you can't see this, can you? No, I can't see it either. All right, so this is the length of the number that we've got to factor. So the bigger the number that is we have to factor, the longer it's going to take. And this is the time that it would take to factor those things. So we assume large number to factor, it could take up to 1 billion years. What we're saying is we're going to reduce the factoring time from a couple of billion years using this architecture with Shor's algorithm. It will take us potentially a few seconds. Yeah? A couple of billion years to factor, a few seconds. And that varies depending on the length of the number you've got to factor and the type of architecture. But pretty much if you take a look at the current NIST requirements, this is a no-brainer. You've got a decent enough quantum computing architecture and you're there. If you take a look at the impact across our current algorithmic space, we've been maintaining for a very long time for AES 256. What you need is a larger key size. But this is also pretty simple. If you have an algorithm that has a maximum of 256-bit key length, use it. This has been the recommendation from the NSA already for a few years to everyone that delivers anything to the NSA. So if you are in the defense industry and you've got to deliver them, the NSA derived a suite B kind of set of recommendations of what you need to do. And this is already there. So this is already practice that we already should have been doing. How many of you know the state of your current cryptographic keys and the length? Size matters. So, guys? Yeah, cool. That's very unusual. I get no one in a crowd that actually understands where their crypto assets are, whether or not they have any followed recommendations. So cool. But this is something that we should all know. The thing is, we are so heavily reliant on this stuff to keep all of our secret, but rarely do we understand if we're actually following these standards as they should be. So, and we're talking also about the symmetric key, by the way. We're not just talking about the asymmetric stuff. So if we want to try to figure out what does it mean to us, there's a couple of fundamental questions we need to ask. First and foremost, how long do we need to keep our encryption secure? I'm asking you, how long do you need to keep your encryption secure? Longest possible versus? What is it you do? Okay, 30 years. Okay, I'll take that. Anyone else longer than 30 years? Shorter than 30 years? Okay. It depends on what? Yes. Yes, I always, yes, very good. But so like, for example, what kind of data would we need to protect longer than 30 years?
National secrets.
Medical data? DNA records? Are you really the dad? No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. That's a total joke, but sorry, that's inappropriate. No. So, but the question is like medical records, I think, is a really good example. Usually they're not for a single lifetime, but multiple lifetimes, because you just want to protect not only the person, but their progeny as well, right? So, medical records, if we would say like a lifetime or 2 lifetimes, we actually don't know how to do this. Even 30 years is going to be a bit of a challenge. Because the second question is, how long before there is a viable quantum computer that can actually, break our secrets? Any guesses? Guys, this is the interactive moment. This is your... How many?
We're in Norway, right?
Oh, Norway, harder to interact? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll try harder. So, how about 10 years? Yeah? So this is because right now the quantum computer it can barely factor 121. Okay, so it just so we'll probably need a decade for something that's reasonable to actually implement Shor's algorithm. This is in the public domain. What happens in the basement of the NSA or of any other intelligence agency with their black budgets, I don't know. But there's an argument saying that you don't just need the money required to run this operation, but you would also need the people, and that's a lot more difficult for them to do work on this and keep it secret unless you have like a brand new Manhattan project. So, which could happen. So, how long would we need then to transition from what we've got now and all of the crypto assets we use all over the world, from both the asymmetric and the symmetric side? By the way, did I make it clear why you still have to worry about symmetric, not just asymmetric? Did I make that clear? Okay, well, I'm just going to go back, because here's the deal. With all of the asymmetric stuff, you need pretty much like a bigger key length, and you need, for some examples, also larger output. But for the symmetric stuff, there's still an issue about how you actually do the key distribution and the key management. And that symmetric side is therefore still an area of concern, because we don't know how we handle that either. So unless we figure that out, then there are both parts that are equally susceptible, but the public key side is just much more at risk, because we know that this factorization problem will have a larger impact. Okay. So how long before we transition? Now, I wish. How long does it take us to implement new standards? How many of you have IPv4 and IPv6 from your network operator? Yeah? So, exactly. So, right, IPv6, I can't even say it with a straight face. So the clue is that we are not good at implementing new standards globally, even when we have to. Even when we know that we've run out of IPv4, we're still like, yeah, dude, I got time. So I think we're going to see a significant challenge in the last part, more than the first two, because the science is going to happen, and we know we still have this need. But I think even in the face of like imminent danger, I don't think we are going to have the agility to switch technology as fast as we should be. So that means there will always be stuff that will be not safe. So I suggest a phased plan of approach of how we deal with it. And this is the practice that I've already implemented in my own company, which is first and foremost, get a hold of your crypto assets. Figure out, at least from a management perspective, in terms of who has them, what do we use them for, how do we deal with them, do we all know what's running and which vendor gives us what. Just have a centralized crypto management policy and make sure you know what you're doing. If you ever want to read it, it's open source. You can Google it, just look up the KPN security policy, and then check out our crypto policy specifically in there. Just to let you know, it was partially written by Phil Zimmerman, who was on my team. Phil Zimmerman, PGP, good guy. So it's a good policy. I think you could take a look at it, and I would feel confident giving it to you. So first and foremost, increase the key length of the current crypto that you use. we know we can do that already. We don't need any help. We don't need any external push. Just make sure we've got it right from that perspective. The second thing you can do is take a look in your network. There might be some very specific places for something called quantum key distribution. I'm going to explain that in the next slide. And you might want to investigate options because this technology is also there now. There are a lot of arguments on both sides about its efficacy, but we can talk about that as well. And then finally, investigate this new set of post-quantum algorithms, which are meant from the get-go to be an answer to new math problems that a quantum computer, even with a quantum computer, you cannot solve. So that's a three-step approach. We don't have a standardized post-quantum algorithmic set yet. That's still happening. But we do have options for the first two. So the idea is don't wait, get started, and we'll figure it out as we get more technology in. So let's talk about QKD, or quantum key distribution. We all know our friends Alice and Bob. So Alice and Bob want to talk to each other, basically in order to avoid Eve, the pesky ex-girlfriend. They're using a quantum channel to communicate. And what they do is basically a quantum channel is something that is secured on the principles of light and quantum mechanics. Yes? And they are having a publicly authenticated channel for like how they actually do their keys. So remember when I told you like symmetric versus asymmetric, it's the key exchange, it's the key management part that makes it finicky? Well, this is the same thing here. That chems part, the key exchange mechanism, is still a question when it comes to QKD. So you need to have a separate channel, an offline channel, for communicating that key pair. And now we're going to talk about what that is. So this is what it really looks like. I don't know if everyone can see it. So you got Alice again, got Bob, and basically everybody knows what polarized sunglasses are, right? So you have a polarized sunglass, which means it allows light in one way, but you turn it, right? And then it doesn't allow light in the other. I feel like, okay, good, yes, so polarized sunglasses for the win. So the idea is we basically are taking a single photon. So we have a photon emitter that emits this photon. Okay, so we have a photon source, a light source. And what we have is then this light going through these polarizers. We have a set of polarizers that are oriented diagonally, and we have a set of polarizers that are horizontal or vertical. Is this idea clear so far? That's all it is. It's just bloody sunglasses. So we have this, and the configuration of Alice's polarizers are the thing that she communicates offline to Bob. She says, "Yo, Bob," on, I don't know, social media probably. This is what my quantum key distribution setup is on my site. Make sure you set up yours the same way. So then Bob then has photon detectors on the other side that can detect the photon coming in. If he doesn't set this up right, he gets gibberish. Everybody good? We're clear? That's it. You are now all experts in quantum key distribution. All right? That is it. So if there is Eve in between this, what's going to happen? Exactly. And that's how you know. Basically, all QKD is testing for the presence of Eve. You want to know if your ex-girlfriend is trying to read your DMs. All right? That's it. And so we started a project when I was still at KPN called quantum key distribution over two small sites. And basically we just have you see it, we have a fiber channel between two locations. It was in The Hague and in Rotterdam. And we set it up just so we could actually test, how difficult would this be for us to do? Can we actually send some encrypted traffic? Would it actually be easy to demonstrate? Yes, we're good. No one else can get to it. So we ran these tests together with IDQ, ID Quantique. They're pretty much the biggest vendor of quantum key distribution in Europe. Yeah, and this again is good now from a network perspective. If you run your own network for specific sites or specific locations, where you would run a very important backup or between two data centers, this is a viable option. When you take a look at what we're trying to build, it's a little bit different, because I think that this will never scale if we just have this site-to-site thing. I don't believe that we will ever achieve any form of true security, because how many of you only communicate to one person over fiber? Right? And this is a problem. So what we're trying to do is figure out if we can build an internet backbone for the entire country. That looks something like this. So it's a 4-node network. We work together with universities. And the idea is between these 4 locations, Amsterdam, Leiden, The Hague, and Delft, we have this setup happening, which is quite complex, but we're going to miniaturize it. This is in the lab. We're going to miniaturize it, and then it comes back in. And then you have this network, this backbone, where you know at least between the nodes and the backbone, it's fully secure. And there's another yet more ambitious goal with this. Because we're working with universities, we want to make it fully quantum. Because in all of these pieces, there's a classical computing component. What if you took it away? What if you could let a quantum computer in Delft communicate to the quantum computer in Amsterdam? So this is game-changing for the planet still, because no one else has done that yet. Wait for it, China will probably do it. But the thing is, this is what we're trying to do. And what's also really funky and very cool, and also presents possibilities, is something called free space QKD. And the idea is, instead of requiring a fiber channel between Alice and Bob, you can just run it over free space, over the ether. So there was an experiment done by Paulo Villarese from the University of Padua, where between Las Palmas and Tenerife in the Canary Islands, over a distance of 144 kilometers, which is fucking awesome, because the max distance you can get with fiber is around 60 kilometers, you know, give or take, tons of dB loss. So, but over 144 kilometers, he managed to actually get a full QKD setup. Not bad. With the water vapor and everything that's coming over the sea. I mean, really, really not bad. Here's the small problem with kind of lasers and QKD. Only works at night. Doesn't work when it's raining. Small issues, but it never rains. I mean, you know. So the deal is also that in China, and I really mean this, China is the force to be reckoned with in this field. And it's because, well, they launched the first ever QKD satellite. Not bad. But they also built a 2,000 kilometer long node to node, which means you have hop-wise security. Everybody in infosec knows what I mean, right? So it's like from one hop to the other hop, you're secure, but you're not end-to-end secure, right? So if we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you're secure from A to B, B to C, but A to thingy, you're not fully, you can't send direct. Okay, good. So we have hop-wise security on this network, but it's actually still really cool because of the engineering effort and the amount of testing they've been able to do because all these companies are already on this network and communicating. I was once corrected. I should tell you about the correction. I was at a conference and I said, this is really cool. I was corrected by a member of the Chinese delegation that says we're not using it for war purposes. It's purely for education and science. Okay. I'm telling you that too. And the difference is, so right now I'm the vice chair of the European Union's quantum flagship. Quantum flagships are really cool. I love being the vice chair because it has all these vice privileges. But the deal is, we have 1 billion euros for Europe. 1 billion. Okay, that's why it's called a flagship, because it's a shitload of money full of flags. So we have this like ton of money for Europe, and where there's a country contribution and scientific contribution to do all these cool quantum things, to build a quantum computer, to have quantum communications networks, to have sensing and meteorology in quantum. So like the satellites that we want to do in GPS, that we have better clocks and stuff, and like we're going to do quantum simulations. We're going to simulate quantum computers on classical architecture. Those are the 4 pillars of science for this EU flagship. 1 billion. China. By the way, that 1 billion is over 10 years. China has per year 10 billion US dollars for all things quantum information science. 10 billion per year instead of 1 billion spread out over 10 years and spread out over all these different countries. Because in every discussion you get about let's build this quantum computing facility there, someone in the meeting will say, but what about Portugal? Yeah? I'm not kidding. All right, because it is really Eurovision Song Festival. Who were we kidding? So So this is what they do, and this is like the core funding. This is coming out of their 5-year program. There's still additional funding. Alibaba, for example, Jack Ma has said he's also going to fund these with separate quantum computing labs all over the planet. So there's no match for the amount of money, the resources, and the science that's happening in China. And what I really worry about is that the retroactive response that'll then be coming like, oh yeah, let's get our ass in gear because they already did that, will be that we look primarily for things like QKD to support only military operations or to look for critical infrastructure continuity. And there are a whole bunch. If you take a look at QKD missions, how many of you guys know about this or follow this? Because they're from all over Europe. There are QKD missions all over even the world, but the majority of them are doing this stuff. And because they're in that military space, we don't get to see them enough, and we certainly don't do the thing that China does very successfully, which is to involve public enterprise in this quantum endeavor. So they have proper stress testing because like the news agencies in there, there's like an internet company, there's all these really cool ecosystem-y like people on the Chinese model. And if we want this to go, viral, it has to get beyond this CI defense space. One of the things that we did, so I'm one of the authors of Q-Critical, along with the ABN AMRO Bank and TNO and CGI. Ignore the Avast logo, that's the background of my slide. But with all these people, we wrote Q-Critical for the European Space Agency, which is to try to examine how can we in Europe have a similar model. Again, this is one of those retroactive things that has like the same competence of what they did in China. Because China, they recently also did like the first ever video conference call between China and Austria over satellites and like fully secured with QKD in space. That is super cool. So in order for us to get the same thing, we tried to establish how you would have this Q-Critical like setup, what it would need. Most of this is available online. If you'd like to read the report or take a look at what we're proposing, please go ahead and check it out. The thing that I worry about beyond the QKD stuff is the evolution of standards. Standards are really important for all things in this area if we want to make it go big. But other than QKD, for the post-quantum cryptographic standards, one thing I'm telling you is we cannot wait. So if you take a look, we had the original submissions to NIST, 4 new PQ algorithms. And what we have, where we are now, is there was just the second round of NIST last summer in Florida. And they had a down select of all of the candidate algorithms that we could have. So we use a candidate algorithm over at KPN because we started testing. That's still in this submission, which is really cool. And we had an ETSI post-quantum conference in Seattle this past October, where we looked at, okay, this is what we have from the NIST submissions. What does the ETSI community do in terms of adopting the same standardization principles? Can we actually further help with trying to toughen the standards and to get to a quicker place where ETSI already thinks about what would we like to use from a European perspective. So the final round 3, which is what is going to happen, that is this year, we hope, and then they will have draft standards. The estimation of draft standards is around 2022. Remember the first 3 questions we asked? Right? How long does it take us to find a standard and then move over? How many of you plan to wait until NIST comes out? Be honest. It's okay. It's cool. Oh, really? All of you are going to go job mod standards now? Awesome. All right, very good. But the majority of people that I speak to are going to wait for the NIST standards to come out. Only then will they figure out what they're going to do. Only then do they know what their cryptographic strategy is going to be. I advise you not to do that. So over at KPN, I'm just going to tell you what we did. We already implemented a post-quantum VPN solution using the Crystals Kyber that is still in the running from NIST. It may not win, but it's cool. At least we have some experience and we understand how it works, how it doesn't work. And after it's been changed, we also adapted our own PQ VPN to adapt the changes in the algorithm after round 2. We are looking at post-quantum SSH, but it's still early days, unfortunately. We want to work with students on this one. And because we have Phil in the team, we are trying to figure out ways to do post-quantum versions of PGP, but that's more further out on the roadmap. And to be honest, this roadmap is difficult churning because at the moment I'm like a sort of quantum ambassador at KPN. I no longer work full-time at KPN as their CISO. I'm the Avast CISO. But I'm still there, which basically means I'm in 2 places at the same time, but only get paid for one. So I urge you all, first and foremost, to figure out what your game plan is by getting like total understanding of all of your crypto assets, the ones that you use for your daily life in your company and in your personal realm. Figure it out. And then think about what it means to be ready in terms of implementation. If it's something you use because you're in CI or you're in the defense space, you're cool. But if it's something where you rely on 20 third parties for the complete solution, you've got to get your act ready now. In terms of supplier security annexes, you've got to look for where you have agility to move some things faster in that long supply chain. You've got to figure out how innovation happens in your companies and create policies for innovation, that they can't keep buying old crappy stuff, and that they already need to now think about asking your vendors these questions. If you also want to take a look at this is also like available online, a lot of this stuff. And then, the biggest thing is to start fucking up, start failing early, figure out what does not work, and then take advantage of that learning time. Thank you.